Welcome to the Healers Café, the number one show for medical practitioners and holistic healers to have heart to heart conversations about their day to day lives while sharing their expertise for improving your health and wellness.
So, welcome to the Healers Cafe. And today I have with me Tasha Darwent. And we're going to be looking a little bit at her whole history and why she came up with the name Resilient Grace Mentoring. And as you'll see, everything makes sense and starts fitting in. So, I think rather than go into a lot of detail, I mean, she has tons of experience in mental health support, life coaching, addiction recovery, as well as her own journey, which always adds a layer that learning cannot achieve, because when you've gone through it, you've gone through it. So I'm really thrilled to have you here and to open up the discussion. So welcome.
So much. Thank you so much. So nice to be here.
Well, I'm going to start with a question that I ask everybody. And it's really just like, what brought you in to some form of healing, some healing arts, some why do you want to help people? And I'm asking it in the context of today, when I believe that there's going to be massive, significant changes in our world. And it'll be hard for people who aren't expecting it and who like things to be as they've always known them.
Mhm.
But I think that with these changes, there's room for creativity, there's room for humanity, there's room for healing in levels that we've never seen yet. So I kind of want to bring the discussion to that level, because a lot of people are currently in jobs that likely won't exist, and they've always felt that they have it in them. They're the ones that people come to, and
Right.
and then they didn't choose that because there's lots of reasons, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of, what made you go in this direction, if you could sort of, and you can define what the direction is, because I know there's
Yeah.
stages.
Yeah, totally. There are stages. And I think what first comes to mind is when since a young age, since I was about 12, 11 or 12 or so, I struggled with pretty intense eating disorder issues, both anorexia and bulimia. And so that was really like my biggest teacher in my life for a long time, for decades. So that's what was both extremely challenging for me, especially as such a young person. And anyone that knows anything about eating disorders knows there's, usually a history of trauma, sometimes sexual abuse. It's a really, it's a deep survival mechanism, to survive and manage things that you don't know how to face in another way,
Mhm.
right? And so that and then that kind of started to cross over in my later years into other addictions, which is pretty common for like a dual kind of experience. Because, eating disorders really have an addictive quality, and so when you're looking to just kind of escape and you don't have any other tools to meet yourself and to show up for yourself, to kind of start to understand what's going on inside, then, right, we just go for maladaptive tools to survive. And so I, from a young age, went to various different eating disorder recovery facilities. And
Mhm.
that's what started my journey of healing. And, like you said, it's very layered, it's very multifaceted, but that's where it started.
Mhm. So if you can sort of like pick one or two or maybe three main things in this journey, like what were the awakening moments, and
Yeah,
how did you transition to, oh, there's another layer to this?
totally. Yeah. So in my this was when I was in my third treatment center. I mean, I was probably at the deepest point of suffering in my life. I had kind of gotten just so stuck in my OCD mind and in anorexia and bulimia, and I was malnourished, and I was really had a lot of self-hatred and trauma and didn't know how to deal with it. And I was um in terms of spirituality and self-awareness, I think like this is when things really cracked open for me. And I in the program we had to read the book The Power of Now.
Mm.
And I had this was probably one of my deepest, like, you know, clairvoyant moments where I felt this, like what felt like the peace of God within me for the first time ever, and I recognized I wasn't my mind, I wasn't my thoughts, I wasn't this eating disorder, I wasn't my emotions, I wasn't my body. I really recognized that I wasn't all these patterns and these coping mechanisms, and these stories about myself, that they weren't the truth, but that they were very, very deeply conditioned. And they were a result, in part, of being disconnected from the truth of who I really was, you
Yeah.
know, of the light, of the higher consciousness. And
Mhm.
so that specific moment really just, it was, as they typically go, right on the tails of probably some of my most intense suffering and
Mhm.
most intense kind of forgetting of who I was and just feeling completely absorbed in darkness, and shadow and ego. And
Mhm.
as I stayed with that process, I read that book, and it kind of cracked me open, and it set a stage for this deeper understanding of who I was and how to work with my mind and my emotions and get back into my body. And you know it started that it
Mhm.
started that
Yeah, I mean it's a wonderful book, and when he talks about the pain body and that whole ability to see yourself in a sense like a soul, having
Yes.
experience
Yeah.
in in a body, but none of it is yours. You
Totally.
are, you know. But it's a very heavy book. I
Mhm.
mean, I've I don't know. Do you know about? I mean, I'm sure you do, but Byron Katie.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay. So I look at her as the one who makes his work easy to understand.
Uh-huh. Sure, sure.
It's
Yep.
like four questions, but when you go down that road, it's the same kind of, you end up kind of realizing that you are, your essence, your soul is on a journey.
Yeah.
It-
Yeah. And it totally, and it just really made sense of something I had never been able to conceptualize before.
Right.
And I think, the repetition he uses in that book, and like, it's like, yeah, it can kind of throw you for a loop, I think, a bit. And also, I think, I don't know, for me, I just had such a need to hear what was said in that book at the time, and I needed it to like be pounded into me. So, I was like, I could start to break through my own patterning a
Yeah.
bit. It served the purpose of that. Yeah.
And it really makes you realize, how that type of integrative approach is missing in so many programs, whether it's addiction or trauma or all kinds of programs, that as long as you feel that you are not a light, you're gonna, your ego's gonna blame you
Mhm.
for everything, and you have to let your ego be right. Right, that's just how we're made, until we realize that it doesn't even work in that paradigm. We're asking the wrong questions, right? So how could you have the right answers, so no. And I think, yeah, work like that is it's essential to breaking all these patterns, so it's
I
profound. Mhm.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's why it was such a turning point for me, because I had never gotten that before, I had never gotten that deeper sense of like, wait, I am a soul here on a journey. This is part of my healing. Like, and yeah, I totally agree. And that's why I like to approach things really holistically, both in my life and when I work with clients, because I see, because I've seen for myself, okay, for a while I just thought, okay, I just need to tend to the emotional and the spiritual, and that's all I really need to do, granted, I always took care of my body. Like I always was aware of what I ate and took care
Mhm.
of it as best I could. But in terms of as I went along in this process for a while, I really thought spiritually and emotionally, all I have to do is tend to that because that's the highest, right?
Mhm.
Like my spirit is the highest. I am a spirit, I am divine. So I should be able to just use those powers to completely heal everything in my physical form, in my emotional, right? And in every element of my life. And that was another chapter that I eventually learned more things I needed to learn because that wasn't because healing the physical and having the right tools for that is so important,
Mhm.
and the emotional and the spiritual and all of it, in my opinion, really needs to be a part of the journey because if not, then we're doing ourselves a disservice because we are multidimensional beings, right? We have a body, like we we have to take care of it.
Okay. So with your as a body experience, I mean, I'm sure that I mean the anorexia would have an impact, but also the autoimmune condition you had, right?
Yeah.
So what was the learning that you had when you decided, okay, I've got to look after the body
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
those?
Yeah. I think that, you know, as I mentioned, I knew I had a hard time taking care of my body from a young age because of the eating disorder challenges. So I was very hard on my body, and that was the way that, my survival patterns kind of played out. Um, but as I got into my, kind of 20s or so, I started to experience some really intense autoimmune symptoms, including like I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. And then I started exhibiting symptoms of celiac, um, and then, ovarian challenges and problems, as well as some really major neurological issues with brain fog and cognitive issues that were really alarming, and so in about 2009, that's when things really kind of got to a head with the symptoms, the physical symptoms I was experiencing. Um, and then I kind of started a deeper dive into, looking into meeting with naturopaths and functional medicine. And I was meeting with doctors both on conventional sides of things as well as alternative, and trying all kinds of different diets and, you know, um, just whatever I could get my hands on that I thought could help me get to the root of healing these now very present physical symptoms I was experiencing. And, I saw, a naturopath that helped me for, I feel like a few years to kind of improve some things, some thyroid issues, some symptoms. But ultimately, um, I got sicker and sicker over this course of it would be about 11 years.
Yeah.
So from 2009 until, about 4.5 years ago or so, my symptoms were just getting worse. And so and during this whole time, like I said, I was on that search of like, okay, this isn't working. Okay, what's next? Okay, what could be the root here, right? Like kind of just grasping at straws, but
Mhm.
not knowing what to do and where to find the right information. Um, and so in the course of that time, I had numerous bowel surgeries, emergency bowel surgeries, because I had a history of bowel obstructions at this point, which I think clearly also linked back to my earlier days of eating challenges and just constantly being in fight or flight, and right, not being able to be in rest and digest and have that
Mhm.
relaxation in my nervous system to allow myself to break down food and to, it lowered my immune system over time. And right. So, I was hospitalized a lot for bowel obstructions. And I ended up having to get 18 inches of my intestines removed. Um, and I also had like an ovarian cyst that ruptured and
Mhm.
wrapped around my fallopian tube. And so I needed to get that removed in a pretty emergent way. Um,
Sorry, before you go on to
yeah,
how it's changed. Um, but it's interesting, hearing, I mean, obviously my training, I've been 30 years a naturopath, doesn't mean that it's the only way to go. I promise you that, because my journey is not about that. But that is what I was doing, until a few years back. But it's very interesting. It sounds like the approaches of naturopathy were also void of that whole bigger picture. I mean, when you look at allopathy and the emergency, when you
yeah,
get to you have to, or some people say you have to take out this or that or whatever.
yeah,
Um, you're definitely then, into the Descartes, cut out pieces and throw them out and
yeah.
whatever. Like real
You don't
fashion.
need them anyway, they say, you know? Right. Yeah.
So for that to be devoid of of that larger understanding of our journey, is
Mhm.
not so surprising. But I have found that in my own profession, there's very few, maybe the ones who all started ages ago, that have held on to this, this natural healing, the fact that our body is capable of so much more, that there's a force within us. It's all different words, but it sounds like many of the new ones that are actually practicing now are very mechanical in their approach. You take this and this, that, and it's back to playing mini God with natural things rather than cocktails that the
Yeah.
alcoholists use. But it's this, unfortunately, becoming more and more the same philosophy, which is not big enough, not
Right.
healing enough.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. And I think, and so I work as a holistic health coach now, and I've gotten to know a lot of some naturopaths during my trainings. And I did see one back in the day who I first started seeing around 2009, who actually, he was really wonderful because he did hold this holistic view truly of who who his patients are as a spirit, and look at the multidimensional being, and kind of really tend to that as much as he could in the scope of his practice. I
Yeah.
felt, and that was like a rare gift I felt like to receive. But after that, and with him, it just, I looking back, I just realized I didn't get to the root
Mhm.
of what was happening, because I think sometimes that information isn't out there. Um,
Mhm.
and I think it also really depends on the individual, in my
Yeah.
experience, right? And like now I have a naturopath, she's a friend of mine, but I, kind of, I've trained with her and we're good friends. And so we dialogue about, supporting each other and
Mhm.
our practices and whatnot. And I see the way that she approaches her clients, and it's very much like this really well-rounded way to look at things. And I've also had the experience you're talking about, I think more often than not, unfortunately, where I, that hasn't been the way that it's been held. And, I didn't get results that way, we could say.
No, no, but I think it's a good point to make, because the name of a profession is
Yeah.
not totality of what the person can bring. Uh,
No.
and then, to always kind of trust that it may, when you have an instinct that this isn't going anywhere, and it's not because you have prejudice against whatever, the natural
Yeah.
thing, homeopathy or whatever it might be that people have issues with. When you get past your own stuff, it's then, is this the right door? Because close it quickly if it's not, and move on, because there
Amen.
are there are doors, there's lots of them.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think I had such a hard time walking away, as soon as I knew it wasn't, well, it was hard to discover because I had so much I had so much like trust and respect in this person. And I think he's a great person and really very knowledgeable about very many things and helped a lot of people. And yet for me and my particular symptoms, I was like holding on, hoping things would work or shift when they were actually just getting worse for me for various different reasons. And so, yeah, I agree with you on that. Like that, I think part of my healing process so much is learning learning to trust my own body, my own intuition, my own sense of things more and more and more. And that's actually been a huge component of self-advocacy, whether it's in a hospital situation or even just now, like I broke my foot, for instance. So I'm here, my foot's elevated here, and I could tell that I had a stress fracture, right? But I went to the ortho doc who said, no, you have, perineal tendonitis. And I was like, huh, really doesn't feel right. And
Mm,
anyway, okay, he's got 18 years experience. Okay, maybe I'll just try it out. And I've been walking on it for a week in a boot, and it's just been getting worse. And
mm,
my instinct in that moment was get an MRI. It was very strong. It was very clear, like respectfully share this with the doctor, like this is what I would like to do. And I'm just reminded today, as I got another appointment, and she said, yeah, I think you have a fracture. And, we need to get an MRI. And I said, oh, I knew it. I
mm.
knew it. But the listening to ourself and trusting ourself with our own bodies and our own healing in every capacity, right,
Exactly.
is so critical. And I feel like we continue to get to learn these lessons because we're human and
Mm.
that's how it is, right?
Really is a dance, because you were talking about that original naturopath who you respected,
Yeah.
right? May well have been able to treat a condition,
Mhm.
the conditions you had,
Mhm.
but not in you,
Not in me.
right?
Exactly.
And not in you because there were layers or parts that
Mhm.
needed to see something else first, right? So it
Yep.
truly it's a dance. It's like, and that's why I'm a real advocate for self-advocacy,
Yep.
because and we don't know until we figure it out. Eventually, you kind of learn to trust, not I had it right this time. And hey, you could be wrong, right? But it
Yeah.
doesn't make them have more rights on your own body, right? Like,
Yep. Yep. And that's it. That's a paradigm. I feel like that's a structure that we all have to break.
What would your life be like if you were pain-free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
yes.
Because like it is our body, it is our free will, but the paradigm, it's tricky because we are sort of told and programmed to look to doctors when we're in a vulnerable place and of course look to practitioners, look to therapists, look to naturopaths, look to and that is obviously there's really wonderful benefit that can come from that. And it's just like, all right, how do we consult our guidance all the way through this experience and we kind of check in with ourselves at various stages and say, oh, does this fit for me? Let me feel into this. How is this going for me, right? Versus just blindly say with disregard to ourselves, like trusting in someone else, be it a doctor or whomever, without checking in with ourselves, because that's right. It's
Well,
not gonna,
it's critical thinking is missing in schools now. There
Mhm.
is regurgitate. So you
Yep.
don't learn to think. And I
Totally.
think in medicine in general, in healing, what's missing too is a lot of the practitioners missing their own journey of, like now you have all these, doctors who, for example, gave I don't know if I have to hide the word still,
Yeah,
that
I don't know either, but I know what you're talking about.
that CVID thing,
Yeah.
and they, the, all doctors have had to have an oath, do no harm. But, they're trying to get off the hook saying, well, it wasn't my responsibility. I trusted the boards that
Yeah.
forced me to do it. And then the boards say, well, we had no choice. We trusted the government. And then the government says they trusted the WHO and blah, blah, blah. And it's like nobody's taking radical self-responsibility, right? And I think that's the problem. This illustrated it. Now it's coming all over the place that, it was wrong to begin with. I'm not going to go into it was intentionally wrong. I personally believe so, but
Me too.
but
Yeah.
but we can at least say that none of the things they said were true, and they covered up everything.
Yep.
And if you look at this, and then you look at other things in medicine, whether it's cholesterol lie, or whether it's the hormone replacement lie, or you start one lie after another, and you start going, oh, the diabetes lie. Like, I mean, it goes so deep, like,
Sure does.
and why is that? It's not because these people that go into health are terrible people.
No,
It's
I think
we're,
so.
we're indoctrinated,
Yeah.
and we don't know it.
Totally, totally. And I think there's a private, medical, industries that are at play, and I agree. I think that various doctors I've seen, are well-meaning, are wanting to help people, and again, it depends on the person, but it's like, they go to school, like for my husband's been healing from cancer, right? For example. And so, he's pretty much healed through a holistic lens, but he goes to his oncologist, and although they're wonderful, they're lovely people, they study chemo and they study radiation and they study, surgical procedures to treat cancer, right? So if we go, and that's because that's what's set up for them in their curriculum when they go to med school,
Yeah.
right? Or like doctors study medicine, right? They don't study nutrition, they don't study herbs, they don't study lifestyle, they study drugs. And so I think these forces that be that aren't really there to support us, that actually set these kind of standards in place and this path in place to have us essentially be unsure of where to find the truthful answers. And there's so much misinformation, and right, like that's kind of the trickle down effect of how that happens. And then when you go to ask your oncologist, hey, is IV vitamin C going to help me? And they're like, there's no clinical studies. And it's like, well, yes, there are, but also like it's not what they have studied, because it's not intentionally in the material that it's put ahead of them to study, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And anyway, we shouldn't go more on to this.
We could go too long on this.
But it is
Yeah.
actually, it's really pivotal to everyone wanting to take care of their health now.
Yeah.
Because we need a true, complete paradigm shift,
Mhm.
not just into natural.
Mhm.
So it's a good
Mhm.
start. But I mean, there's plenty of lethal natural things. It's really the attitude of that connection with yourself.
Mhm.
And, yes, there's expertise, but you're always your second best opinion about yourself, if
Mhm.
not your first,
Ah,
I think that's what we have to wake up to, and stop making everyone else a god and not treat ourselves like at least of
Yeah.
some light essence,
I love that so much. And I think we can't get enough of those reminders. I think we all have, I can speak for myself, such a heavy amount of programming from forgetting who we are for so long and being disconnected from that light essence. And whether you believe in lifetime after lifetime or just this lifetime, the pain and suffering we've all gone through and what we've been told that we're not good enough and we can't trust ourselves and we're not, goodness, has a lot of unprogramming to happen for us to believe that, and I think this healing path involves many things, but I think that is essentially, at the core of all of it, because that helps us navigate wisely the choices that we make and how we use our own free will. And if we can't trust that and we don't believe that's there for us, then of course we're looking outside of ourselves everywhere we turn for direction,
Yeah.
you know?
Talking about direction, I wanted to jump into a part of your healing journey, and that was in 2020, I believe you said you came across a medical medium.
Mhm.
And I have interviewed a few, three years ago, 4 years ago, and yeah, I haven't recently, but I was just curious in your journey because you've done the physical, you've done a lot of the psychological, emotional
Mhm.
parts of it. What was the door that opened, or the door that that came your way to open? Like, what was that transition?
Totally, totally. Well, that too happened in stages. In 2020 was when I finally was broken down and desperate enough to try this information. And so this medical medium is Anthony William. He's been a huge presence in supporting people that are chronically ill. He hears spirit of compassion that has guided him from age 4 to support this population of people that are chronically ill with root causes of their illness and tools as to how to heal. And so, this information kind of came to me. It was years before, and like in passing, I was in the grocery store checking out with a girl I used to nanny, and I was mentioning something about the pain in my stomach because I had these reoccurring intense stomach issues, and she overheard us and she said, "Well, try celery juice," and I was like, kind of rolled big eye roll with that, like this person saying, try celery juice, this could help you. And I think I had gotten so jaded in my journey because I had tried everything I could think of and I had spent so much time and money, saw so many specialists, and nothing had helped me. So this kind of, you know, s- off the cuff, like, try celery juice. I was like, yeah,
Sure.
right. But it stuck with me, right? Something stuck with me of like, okay, let me look into this celery juice. So I started just kind of looking into that information years ago, and then I just kind of left it. I really misinterpreted the information, and I thought it's all raw vegan, and I tried to eat that kind of way. And because of my missing bowel,
Yeah.
I hadn't healed enough in my gut to be eating all that raw food. So I did myself a disservice by not really looking into the information in a wholehearted way. And then it took me 2 more years
Oh my
that
goodness.
for that to come back into my rotation. And it was really because I had been hospitalized 3 times in 2020, which was obviously the year COVID hit too. And so it was just a rough year for everyone. Like no one could come in the hospital. It was just a tough time. And I was just so desperate. I couldn't eat anything. My neurological issues were just horrible. The mental health, was really poor because of all of these chronic issues. And so then I started looking more into Anthony Williams information.
Yeah.
And then I started doing celery juice because he was saying celery juice can help restore the HCl in your stomach and can help with the, your neurotransmitters and the mineral salts and kill off pathogens, including viral activity and bacterial activity that is most often at the root of these mysterious chronic health issues, as well as toxic heavy metals.
Yeah, parasites.
Yeah. And it sounded really foreign to me. I think that's part of the reason for me. It wasn't in my belief system. It wasn't in my worldview. I hadn't been told it by the bazillions of doctors I had seen. So I was kind of like, I was just desperate enough to say, well, what the hell? I'll give it a try. I have nothing to lose. I started kind of following some people on social media, and I got this book called Cleanse to Heal, which was written by him and the spirit of compassion. And I just got kind of obsessed with it because for the first time ever in my chronic illness journey, I felt heard, I felt seen, I felt validated. I felt like when I read that book that those words were speaking to me, like that was very divine. And I felt like, oh my God, these are the answers for me.
Yeah.
And I just started doing celery juice, and my stomach and my brain and my energy and various things started really improving. And I was sort of like, I had believed in the power of nutrition, right? But like, I just didn't know which nutrition was right for me,
Mm.
and I couldn't eat any nutrition. So I was just kind of like, so I was pretty impressed when this little simple healing medicinal, herbs started helping me. And so then I just got more interested. And then I started doing something he brought to the world called the heavy metal detox smoothie. And
Yeah.
that started to really help with my depression, with my brain clarity, with clearing out the metals from the other places in my body. And then I was just kind of like sold, and then I was like, bit by bit, I started adding more from his books and protocols, and healing is quite a journey. Even after you have the right information, there's years and years, as of viral activity, bacterial activity, trauma, stress, metals, toxins in the body that, stress patterns that I had to really continue to work with, while now bringing in these other healing tools and tinctures and supplements and foods and herbs and things.
And did you actually get to ever speak with him, or it was always indirectly through his teachings?
It was always indirectly, but your timing's interesting because he just had an event in LA that I went to a couple weeks ago, and I didn't he's very well known. So he, didn't get time to speak. There were thousands of people at this event, but he did sign books and he did speak, and I did see him, and I had a moment with him of just telling him thank you. And
Uh,
it was really, he looked up and he looked at me right in the eyes and he said, "It is my honor,"
mm,
and it was just really touching, and it was a really beautiful, light-filled event with people that all understand each other on a certain level, because we've all been on this kind of hellish journey of chronic illness, and we have found healing to some extent, if not the full extent.
right. Wow,
Yeah.
wonderful. I mean, wonderful story. I mean, in the end, it is a journey. Like
Yeah.
you could be on another one, but this is yours.
Yep. It is. And I know, I mean, it's like, it is what it is, right? I'm like, would I have chosen these things? Like, I don't know. But in reality, they're here. They've
Yeah.
taught me a ton. Now it's my life's work to support people with chronic illness and people that have addiction struggles and a history of trauma, and right? Had we not gone through whatever we've gone through that made you want to be a naturopath, or made me want to be a mentor at a halfway house, and now in my own business or with people with chronic illness, like, we wouldn't be of service in the way that we are. And so there's a depth to it that's really, I think, special. And, it's it's a tough path to walk, but here we are, and it's what we're doing. So it's,
And
yeah.
where can people find out more about you and that? We'll be putting all the notes that you've given, but
Yeah.
maybe also verbally to share that.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I have my own practice now, kind of helping these various populations, um, uh, with chronic illness, with mental health challenges, addiction, and all specifically brain and neurological challenges, as well as digestive, and women's health challenges, but really all of chronic illness. So people can find me at resilient-grace.com. That's my website. And then I've started to be a bit more on Instagram, and it's just my first and last name, which is Tasha.Darwent on IG, and it's Natasha Darwent on Facebook. And I'm also starting a free chronic health challenge support group, and it's going to be the first Tuesday of every month, and it's going to cover a wide range of holistic topics, all things having to do with, things that impact our health and chronic health, from, emotional well-being to community connection to nutrition to environmental toxins and pathogens to, you name it, kind of stuff. So I want to just have a place where people can come out of isolation and out of hopelessness and shame, because that's what happens when people get sick for a long time. And they can come and feel met with empathy and understanding, and feel safe sharing what's really going on for them, and hopefully get some tools and resources to implement and improve their health and well-being.
Well, that's wonderful. And thank you. Our time is like up. It's past up.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was
Anyway,
a pleasure.
yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Your journey, I think it always helps and inspires when people can see what really happens, real discussions, So
Totally.
thank you for
Totally.
participating.
My pleasure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café. If you haven't already done so, please like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on, as I post a new podcast every Wednesday with tons of useful information and tips for natural healing that you won't want to miss.